Online? Hi, good morning. Before I start, this was the book, Jeffrey Archer's Paths of Glory. It is based on a true story, so that's why I really found it fascinating. I think besides the two of us, has anyone else read the book? No. So then I'll just give a short synopsis. I had sent a link with a synopsis. I don't know if you all got time.
Yeah, I went over that.
Okay. Did you go through it, Smita?
Yes,
The link?
Yeah, I saw that. I read that.
Then would you like to tell me what you remember about the synopsis?
See, actually, I'm not a fan of expedition movies or novels or whatever. But what I got to know was that probably, was an unsung hero. And probably he did climb the Mount Everest. Because as they say, when they found his body 75 years later, I guess, they found everything intact in his wallet except the photograph of his wife, which apparently he promised her that he will put it on the highest peak when he reaches.
Yes.
So that there are, I think, a lot of theories on this. People are really not sure whether he actually was the first man to climb Mount Everest, but that particular that photograph missing, that they feel probably he actually did reach the peak.
Yeah, so that's good. At least you got the basic.
Yeah.
So what the book is about, which is what you all missed because you all haven't read it, was it talks about his whole life from when he was a child to when he died. And Jeffrey Archer very cleverly brings out how this boy, even as a child, was totally obsessed with climbing. He was climbing everything. He even tried to climb the Eiffel Tower in Paris.
And then
he used to climb the wall at Cambridge because he was late for
late for the interview. Yeah.
And he had been on 3 Everest expeditions. And he was the one who was voted most likely to climb Everest for the first time. And he had climbed all the other mountains in the world, Switzerland, in Austria, in Scotland.
And he was a teenager. He
At a very young age.
all the ones in Scotland.
And he had this ability that he could stand at the base of a mountain and look up and figure out the shortest way to get to the top.
Oh.
This ability he brings out so well in the book that how he used to sometimes go to the housemaster and he was just a young adult and he used to reach the peak first while the more experienced people used to arrive after him because he took another route and they took another route. So this was his gift, which people realized each one who traveled him, went up a mountain with him, knew that he always knew which way was the better and faster route. Now, the problem with those days in 1920s was, I don't know if you all know, but Everest had 2 sides to climb, the south and the north. And so what happened? The south was easier, and it was through Nepal. Nepal in those days did not allow any white person to enter the country.
So, sorry, AKG, what is this noise coming in between?
I know
Anyone else getting in?
somebody is kept it on.
I think Smita ma'am is from your side. Can you mute
Smita,
yourself?
can you put up your volume? Mute it for some time.
Yeah.
Now it's fine. So there were 2 sides to climb Mount Everest, the north side and the south side. And the south side was the easier side from Nepal. But because they did not allow foreigners or white people to enter their country, nobody could climb from Nepal. So everyone had to go through the other side, the north side, which was the difficult side, and take permission from the Dalai Lama before climbing the Everest. So in those days, everybody who attempted Everest was going through the tougher side.
Tough.
And the joke was Edmund Hillary, when he did climb, he climbed from the Nepal side because by that time in 1950,
Right,
Nepal was allowing foreigners.
right.
That was another feat of Mallory, that he was, if he did climb, if he didn't get there, it was through the difficult side. So, and another thing which proves that he may have reached the 99% was that he was last seen, he and the other Sandy, just 600 meters from the top. So that was the other reason why they felt like if he got there, it means he must have reached the top. But of course, the photo, as you rightly mentioned, that was the clincher, that the wife's photo was not with him. And he had promised his wife that he would put her photo on the. So that was. And so the whole book also talks about one interesting thing, that how the English or the British were always obsessed with being the first. The first. So what upset them was that the North Pole, who was the first to climb the North Pole? Anybody?
Ronald Amundsen?
Oh, no. That was
Pearl.
South Pole.
Okay, so some peel or something, a pearl.
Yeah, Peary. So an American was the first one to reach the North Pole, and a Norwegian was the first one to reach the South Pole. So now the British suddenly started getting worried that everybody else is reaching everywhere. We have to at least make it to Everest, because there were fewer things to claim. And so that's why they funded all those expeditions to go and figure out how to get to Everest before anyone else. And that is why Finch, who was the second most experienced climber, was not encouraged to go because he was Australian by birth, which was a big mistake, which everybody felt in hindsight, because if he had been there with Mallory, things may have gone very differently and they may have survived instead of Mallory dying. And also an interesting thing which I didn't know, but I should have realized, was Everest wasn't called Everest at that time. So does anybody remember what it was?
Chomalinga?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was called Chomalongma, which means goddess, mother of the world.
That's in Nepali.
In Tibetan. And they felt that you have to respect her, you have to pray to her, you have to take her permission and then go, otherwise you will die. And also, so throughout the book, there's an interesting note mentioned that he had loyalty to two women.
Yeah.
One was his wife,
Everest.
and one was Everest. And because he had this divided loyalty, Everest would not let him climb
Oh.
to the top. If he had been more loyal to,
He would have.
but even in the end, he was torn between his wife and Everest. He didn't want to go the third time. So it just circumstances happened that he was forced to go as a leader the third time and see what happened.
Hi.
Yeah, so what was the other? They were, hi, sorry, you look so cute.
I stayed overnight with my friends.
Okay. So there were also some other interesting personality traits about Mallory, which I found pretty hilarious. I don't know if you remember any, since I know you read the book. Okay, so one is he was never on time. He was always late. Even if it was an interview to get into university, he was late. And the second thing was he was extremely forgetful. Like if he had to take 10 things, he would forget 5 things. And even at the end, he lost his food at that last camp on top. And they had to send extra food on the second last day because they realized he lost all his food and everything. So he was really, not at all organized. He was only focused on, bus, I have to get to the top of it. That's all. He was not worried about everything else. And he was determined. And that comes across when he wanted to marry Ruth. He just met her at a casual dinner which her father had hosted. And her father hosted this dinner because he had three daughters, and like our society, he wanted a nice suitor for them. So he invited two young men, one of which was Mallory. And Mallory, when he saw Ruth, he couldn't take his eyes off her, and he was just determined to marry her. And he followed them all the way to Venice, where they were going on a summer holiday, so that he could pretend to bump into them, and like a real Hindi movie kind
And
of.
that his best friend is.
Yeah, his best friend was also interested in Ruth.
And he was proposed by
And he
was
thought Ruth
invited
is
to
more
come to-
interested in his best friend. But he didn't care. He wanted her and he got her. And that is obviously quite hilarious how he got her. He tried to climb this marks in Venice. And that's when she realized she really loves him, because she almost fainted, or she fainted when she saw him climbing up. I don't know what. And she, from the beginning, was worried that this fellow is so obsessed with Everest that something is going to go wrong and one day he won't come back. So throughout the book, she's torn between, should I support him and his ambition and his desires, or should I stop him from going? And so that is also a very interesting aspect of the book. She talks to other mountaineers' wives and say, how do you deal with this? When every time he goes, I don't know whether he'll be coming back. So then they all discuss it that, when you're married to a man like this, you can't stop them. That is their life's ambition. And so you have to support them. And she even didn't tell him she was pregnant the third time, because she was worried that he will get affected and come running back. So these were the kinds of sacrifices, and
Especially when she said that go and these seduce, what call it that mountain?
Chomolungma.
Chamolong.
Yeah.
So go and seduce and then come back. Because,
Yeah.
Once you seduce, then you will be forever back to me.
Yes. This is exactly, yeah. She said, go seduce her, and once you have seduced her, then forget about her. It will be out of
Then
your
it is
mind.
like, it's say goodbye forever.
And then the other time we saw his determination was 1940, when the World War began. They were supposed to go on an expedition in 1915, which obviously got cancelled because of the war. And he, being a schoolmaster, was exempt from joining the army because education had to continue. But he didn't care. He just decided to join the army. He didn't have to.
He referred something to his father. Stay behind the
action. So there also, he didn't think about his wife and children. He just felt he wanted to serve and he just went. So from that time, you come to know, that when he wants to do something, he just goes ahead. He doesn't think too much about what he's leaving behind. So the first expedition was in 1921, which was just to like a reconnaissance mission to see how to go, whether it's possible, whether with oxygen, without oxygen, all those things. Second one was 1922, which was a total disaster, where they were suddenly hit by an avalanche and 7 porters died. None of the whites died, but 7 porters died. And it was quite funny because they went through India, which was being run by the British. And they had an army general called General Bruce, who managed this whole expedition. He was also quite a pompous ass. And they took 70 mules and 60 porters. You know how they used to travel in those days? Every single bartan, every single, the teapot kettle and the china, everything had to be done properly. Like this huge expedition trying to climb Everest. I mean, it was quite hilarious. And it was nicely described, their journey, how they reached Darjeeling from Calcutta by train, and then they took that toy train, and then they entered through Siliguri side, that Sikkim, from that side. That's how they. So that was also very sweetly written. And he used to write a letter every day to his wife.
Every day.
That was quite something. I mean, the way he loved her was just amazing, and really nice, heartfelt letters. And a lot of these letters have been published, and these are true copies of the letters. These are not made up. So that was also
These
very.
are extraordinary people. That's why we
Yeah.
are still talking about them.
And one interesting fact was brought up about women. I don't know, does anybody remember, or did anybody come across the state of women in the UK at that time? So again, that was interesting that they were not allowed to be educated. We thought it's all been in India.
In India.
Okay, imagine the 1920s. There were no women in the university. His own sisters were not allowed to go to university. When he went to meet his future wife, those three were not allowed to go to university. And these discussions were happening everywhere. And they show him to be a very forward-looking gentleman who was promoting. He said, why not? Let them climb Everest with me. Let them go. Let them do everything. But there were so many people who did not like that. And at these meetings of the Royal Geographical Society, the women were on a balcony, literally like parda, and watching from there. They weren't even allowed to sit in the main hall. So this I found very odd. That means, when did women in the UK start going to university?
Oh, my God. Oh, 19. Yes.
So must have been towards
She was 20 then.
late 20s, early 30s. So, and then
1947 independent happened.
No.
By the
Before
time
that,
education was like
I'll show you how
No,
before
but
that.
even I was born in 1939, and more than half the people did not vote.
our country.
Scotland.
Would you all like to add a few things before I read some passages at the end of the book, which are about the real characters in this book and what some of them, including his grandson and his colleagues. So before that, I thought if we could open up the house, if anybody wants to say anything. We could start with you because you read the book.
Yeah, but I've already forgotten. But funnily enough, he joined the army in 1914. So did my father. But he didn't know. He was born in 1895, but he was conscripted into the army. He was almost forced to go. And he drove an ambulance, a horse ambulance. And he had to look after all the horses himself and go into where the fighting was going on and take out the wounded soldiers.
Then tell them
And then
also
about
your climbing expedition.
I used to climb. I had also climbed almost all the mountains in Britain, but I used to climb a teenager, and before that, my parents also used to love climbing. And all the mountains he mentioned, Snowdon and Gorms and everywhere I used to. I've climbed them. So, and then another thing, it was about when they went to go to Tibet, General Bruce, who was really pompous. Of course, they would only allow people who were highly educated, who had been to Oxford or Cambridge, basically. Only they were allowed to be even considered to be the climbers. A fellow like Finch, who was an Australian, he was just out of it completely, and some of the others, because they thought they were just weren't worth anything unless they'd been to the top universities. And General Bruce marched up when they were going into Tibet, he marched up to the authority there and had to face a gun, because they said, who are you? You're going to enter? He said, I'm General Bruce. I'm in charge of this expedition. He said, the only person who can go in is Lord Curzon. And is he Lord Curzon? And the translator said, no. He says, then get out of here. And again, they pointed their guns at him. one of the chaps was very clever. He said that Lord Curzon, every time he goes out, he wears a Homburg, you know, those hats with a little tip. And we have his one Hamburgs here. So they looked in his bag, found there were 10 hats there, and he handed it around and put it even on the Sherpa's head. Said, I said, and then he pointed at the general's belt. And general was very unwilling to take it off because it had his arms, his own personal arms. Frame of it.
And the general, imagine when the porters were hired, he inspected their late 20s or inspected their and their feet as if they were animals of
Not everywhere. In personal places too, he inspected.
Yeah, so he was really quite a character. He was more interested in whether they were, and then he jumped on them. He jumped on them to see if they can carry him if required. And they used to keep falling down because the Sherpas and porters, you know how they were little fellows. They could barely carry at least they could carry things, but not if you jump on them and crush them. And he was a heavy fellow, the general, little fat. So it was quite funny the way they were selected. They were not even given any recognition. Their names were immaterial. It was quite odd.
And then the controller, he also pointed at General's watch. So he had to take off his watch and give it. And Mallory was saying, thank God, this time again, I forgot to wear the watch. So he didn't lose his watch.
But that reminds me of another interesting point. Whenever Mallory climbed a peak, he used to place a sovereign, which is like a gold coin with the king's photo on it, of Geoffrey Young, who encouraged him from when he was young to climb. And on Everest, that is all fiction. I mean, when he climbs and he puts the photo, that part Jeffrey Archer's made up because nobody knows what happened. There he says, oh no, I forgot to bring the sovereign. So even on Everest, they show that he's happily forgotten what he was supposed to put there. He forgot to take that out.
The book started with the white picture in his pocket. No, so they said
no, it wasn't in his pocket.
Wasn't in his pocket.
So the book starts. That's another interesting point. You want to talk about how it starts? So book starts with how an expedition goes to look for his body in 1999. As you mentioned, 75 years after he, and that's when they found his body. That's when they found it. That's when they saw that his wife's picture, because of the freezing temperatures, his wife's picture was missing, and that's what they deduced that he must have climbed.
But he must have forgotten.
Yeah, but the second, or he forgot it. No, but they didn't find it in the tent also. They found
they came down.
they came down in the last tent and they found his last letter to his wife, but her photo was not there either. And the guy who climbed with him, a young fellow who should not have really climbed that day, he was not experienced enough.
Yes,
His body was never found, even till today. But they say that a Japanese guy in 1960 saw it and he spoke to other climbers about it. But then he died on Everest, the Japanese climber, and nobody could ask him further questions as to where exactly he saw that body.
And I think they 20 years, somebody like that expedition, somebody saw the
previous
body, and after 9 years of, they mentioned that they saw, and the body
the same.
I think you said the Chinese took his body, AK, in some note that you had sent of that other climber.
So that's what they know. They said that the Chinese found the body, but then because that Chinese climber died, they didn't have any evidence of where that body was and whether it was really the second climber or whether the Chinese took it later or what. Because remember that side was from the Tibet side. So the Chinese have now. So they could have easily gone and taken the bodies or what. Nobody knows.
What was the story about oxygen cylinder?
Yeah, so Finch,
Oh.
who was the Australian, he was always a protagonist for oxygen cylinders. And they all felt it's not manly to be climbing peaks with oxygen and all. But after the 1921-22 expeditions, they decided that it is better to use oxygen.
Mandatory.
Because they saw Finch used to just literally run up and down other peaks fitter than he didn't feel or look tired. So if he's like that with oxygen, then maybe we should also use. And guess what the Sherpas porters called the oxygen? They used to call it English air. So that they have brought English air with them to breathe on. So that was quite funny, you know.
I think warned him about that, I don't have a very good gut about him.
But in the end, Finch was not there, and that's what created the problem. They
Because
say Finch would have saved, yes,
He saved his life, the first one.
yes. So it turned out to be the opposite that Finch. So shall I read some interesting
Yeah,
facts of what happened to Finch and these other?
The only thing I read, the extra thing was that for a short period he was a homosexual because he was such a handsome guy. So Jeffrey Archer, he did not mention it in the book. So.
But
Yeah.
somewhere
Yeah.
There was a slight hint
In the beginning, there was a slight reference that this so and so guy.
But I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, he did say that. Yes, he did say that. Yeah.
And also he said, yeah, so about Finch, there's an interesting message, a note, that he was appointed a fellow of the Royal Society finally, because he was not British, he was not allowed in the society. But eventually, in 1938, they appointed him as a fellow. He then became president of the Alpine Club, which was a climbing mountaineering club, from 59 to 61. But what happened in 1931, which is just 7 years after this, 3 of Finch's friends fell to their deaths in the Alps. And so after that, he never climbed another mountain again. Finch, who was so good, such a good mountaineer, it affected him so badly that he never climbed again after 1931. And he finally died in 70, aged 82. Then another interesting thing I found was about his sisters. His children. His children, finally, his daughter, he had 2 daughters and 1 son. Yeah, I
And
forgot.
one son.
No, 1 son. And
3 children, yeah.
he had 3 children.
Okay, and 3 grandsons, but somewhere they written 1 then. But I don't know.
So the nice part is the daughters did go to university.
Okay.
So it's mentioned that one girl, she went to Cambridge, one daughter, she married an American scientist and they moved to America. But believe it or not, her husband died in a climbing accident in Tennessee in 1947. So she, like her mother, was left to bring up 3 children without a husband. So see how history repeated itself. Then the second daughter became a doctor. So again, she got educated. She married a professor of English, again from Columbia University in the US. Her husband wrote a book about George Mallory, about her dad. But she, like her mother, she got breast cancer. Her mother, Ruth, also got breast cancer and died very young. And she also got breast cancer and died at 36.
Right.
Yeah. Then the son moved to South Africa. And there he had 5 children. One grandson was named also George Mallory. And he climbed Everest. Yeah. So I'm just reading out about the grandson. So George Leigh Mallory II, he is a senior water engineer working on water projects in Australia. At 5:30 a.m. on 14th May 1995, that's 4 years before his dad's body was found, George Leigh Mallory II placed a laminated photo of his grandfather and grandmother
Wow.
on the summit of Everest. And in his own words, he said, I'm completing a little outstanding family business.
Down in the bladder. I got
So AKG, these were three daughters of Mallory or Finch you're talking?
right.
No, these Mallory's two daughters and son.
Mallory's. Okay.
And
Mallory's.
Mallory's grandson, also
Got it,
called
got
George
it.
Mallory, climbed
Got it.
Everest in 95.
Got it.
So it's very interesting to read what happened to all the climbers. Most of them lived till 85 and 95 and
Because they were fit, maybe.
yeah, they were all fit fellows. But except for Mallory is the one who and so they say, so then again in the summary they say George's body was discovered on 1st of May 1999 at 26,760
Only
feet.
800
Yeah.
meters.
The photo of his wife was not in his wallet, and the camera which they feel would have taken evidence of photographs was nowhere to be found. To this day, the climbing fraternity are divided as to whether he was the first person to conquer Everest,
Certainly.
but 99% feel that he was definitely capable of reaching the peak.
So maybe that the body was found after so many years there, had it was earlier. Maybe they would have considered that he was the one who went down. Like the Everest of the first.
And here's another funny fact. The second guy, Andrew Irwin, who also died with him, they said after he died, 3 women came forward claiming to be engaged to him.
Or maybe he was multitasking.
Yeah. So whether that was true or not was very funny. Yeah. So Jeffrey Archer has done his research. Everything is true except that last day where he's just imagined that they did climb and what happened there. They took each other's photograph and that he placed the photo and he remembered he'd forgotten the sovereign. And then while climbing down, they made a mistake. And remember, throughout the book, they say coming back down is more difficult. Yes. And he gives a very nice example of why. He says, when you're climbing up, you can see your hands right in front of you and where you're putting your hands. And the rule is that you should always have 3 points attached to the mountain. So either 2 hands and 1 foot or 2 feet and 1 hand. So you should never remove more than 1 point. While climbing down, you're relying on your feet. So you can't see them. Because if you look down, you fall. You're not supposed to look down. And that is why it's more dangerous to come down than to go up. And if he died at that point, they also feel it's 100% while coming down.
Back. That means he is reached there.
Yes, and that he did reach there. So it's very strange, because in the end, it was a New Zealander who got there after so many years. And
at that time, his wife also died.
Yes. By that time, she died at 50. And so, despite all their attempts, the British never reached Everest if they didn't have evidence at least.
And they had this discussion also that who will be the first one, Australia or Australia, and we want Jim to be the first one to climb the mountain.
So that was very sad.
And I really like this one that because it is there. I want to climb it.
Why do you want to climb it? Why are you so obsessed with it?
Because it is there. So that was my biggest
Attraction.
I kind of take away from the book because it is there.
And every holiday he was climbing. He was not interested in anything else. He used to just try to get somebody to fund him because it's not cheap. You can't just go and buy any old thing and travel and equipment and all. And once they realized that he's so good, everyone was paying for his expeditions and his climb
Expeditions.
and his experience. So he was everywhere, climbed everything. So that was so.
I really think that just because it's there, was his attitude that, okay, let me climb the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
Just like it is there, and I climb the wall because I have to get it. So I think that was his very casual, easy go-getter attitude.
He had no
He
fear.
had no fear.
They say that he had no fear, and that is why he was such a good climber. Because he knew which routes to take.
He was
B, he had
naturally
no fear.
not in training. He
Yes.
was a natural climber.
That is what.
I also, just one interesting point is that I have flown from Nepal to Bhutan, right on a tiny 9-seater aircraft, which goes right between the Everest and the other big mountain, Kanchenjunga. And from there, you can look, and they show you the road to China. The road means it's a valley which goes in a straight line to China. It's a wonderful experience. And they took it. The pilot took each passenger into the cockpit so that you could get a clear view on all sides. It's absolutely wonderful. Took some photographs too.
Just a fun fact. Does anybody know when the first Indian climbed Everest?
I think 64.
65. Correct. So it's almost he obviously was in the Indian Army. Yeah, so they took an expedition and he was the first. There were a whole bunch who reached, but he's the one who put his foot first. No, Chima, he was a Sardar. Who reached.
There's an Indian lady, she's climbed it twice, I think, Bachendri Pal. I'm not sure.
After that, so many reached.
And how many climbers died attempting to
That's what we were
32,000
talking before you came.
yeah.
And the other thing, he almost went to jail each time he did all these crazy things. When he climbed the Eiffel Tower, he was arrested. Then when he tried
And he was arrested for not paying the entry fee for Eiffel Tower, not for climbing.
yeah, that was the funny part. And the second time he was almost arrested for that St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice, when his wife literally saved him, his roof on the train, because the cops were looking for him everywhere. So each time he tried to climb these monuments, obviously the police were all after him. He didn't care. It didn't bother him at all.
You got to be madly in love with something to do to reach to the top, or excel.
And it described the wife's attitude. She was terrified every time he left. But and he would say, he would ask her, should I go or should I not go and take a risk? But she knew that was his absolute passion. So she used to say, yes, of course you can go. I won't be worried, I promise. But really, in the heart of hearts, she was absolutely terrified.
So people just erroneously say that Hillary was the first. In my view, both Tenzing and Hillary, you can't single out one. And somewhere I remember reading, when both were there, Hillary said, I want to go first or something. And Tenzing said, no problem or something like that. So maybe technically Hillary could have set foot first, but it was the greatness of Tenzing who, gave him that, because without Tenzing, Hillary wouldn't have gotten there. And the sad thing is, after that, even though Tenzing got a lot of respect in India, but in Nepal, where he was a Sherpa, but he settled in Darjeeling and he was made the head of the Mountaineering Institute. In Nepal, was not respected because they feel he's not done anything for Nepal, whereas Hillary said did a lot of charity there. So that was a sad aspect of Tenzing. But I feel he was certainly a better climber than Hillary. And so these things happen. And then there's this book in Guns of Navarone. They use another name for Mallory. It's called Keith Mallory, but it's allegorical, saying that he climbed Everest. So in that book also, Alistair MacLean, the author, says that someone had climbed it. Just some other tidbits. no one climbs Mount Kailash because it's considered temple. The only
Yes.
person ever to have climbed Mount Kailash, I've done the parikrama, was Milarepa. He was a Tibetan Sherpa. I think he did it in the 15th century. Some other people who have tried have never come back from Mount Kailash. And and the climb to Everest, people say it's littered with bodies. It can be jarring, like, and they're well preserved because of the snow. And it may be quite, and oxygen is a big issue there. And if you don't have oxygen, that's called the death zone or something, 8,000 meters high above. And every ounce of oxygen is very precious. That's why in 1996, many climbers died because there was a blizzard there. The people started taking commercial climbing, but because I think they ran out of oxygen, so there were many deaths there. And it was crazy. Many of you have seen that 14 peaks we were talking earlier. Nirmal Purja climbed it, and there was a what do you call, a traffic jam on Everest.
Yes,
Such a
I
famous
know.
photo is, and at that time you are consuming precious oxygen, which is totally very bad on Nepal to have issued so many climbing permits. And they say the most difficult peak to climb is K2 in Pakistan.
Yes, yes.
That's more kind of
Dangerous.
problematic. Yeah. So these are just some other things outside the book.
I'll
because I've
also
not read
read
it.
a few lines from his last letter to Ruth, where he says, I'm sitting in a tiny tent, 27,300 feet above sea level and almost 5,000 miles from my homeland, seeking the paths of glory. So this is the name that says, even if I were to find them, it would be as nothing, since I'm unable to share this moment with you. And he said, I should not have needed to travel halfway around the world to discover that without you, I am nothing. As many less fortunate with envy in their eyes have often reminded me. And they are wrong. I have already found the woman of my dreams, and nothing will ever take her place. So he's talking about Ruth. Certainly not this ice cold virgin that slumbers above me. So he gives disrespect in this one line to Everest. And that's what the Christians believe, that if you don't give proper respect, if you don't say your proper prayers, she will not let you live. Everest will not let you live. So, and at the end, he says, forgive me for having taken so long to realize that you are more important to me than life itself. So
in the end,
he begins
says,
to realize that he should not have come, and if he has, it's this is the last time, and he's never going to come. But it was too late. He never went. He never lived.
But AK, here he clarifies that his first love is his wife.
Yes, he realizes it at the end that he just took her for granted, and his children and everybody, just to go after this obsession of his, which in the end, what happened? I mean, it just killed him off.
I think this virgin cold icy mountain he's said earlier also.
Yeah, he has mentioned.
I have not completed the book, but I remember this.
I don't think that's disrespectful though. But there are some climbers who have said we have conquered Everest. I think that is disrespectful.
Yeah.
You say you climb the mountain, you don't conquer it. But there are people who have climbed it and use that terminology.
Yes, that's true.
I know Hillary said we knocked the bastard off. That's all right.
Oh.
But you can't conquer Everest. You can climb it.
See, we Indians always pray to our Mother Earth and the mountains and the rivers, the Ganges,
But
So
we
even
pray
the
and we
Tibetan-
pollute it. Yeah. I mean,
Tibetan and
Tibetans,
Nepalese also, they also pray to these non-living things also.
In the American Indians used to
even
respect
American Indian,
so many
all Aboriginals,
and all those
Yeah.
lovely
Africans, everyone, earlier
Mother
it was that
Nature.
was it, Mother Nature.
Even when we go via car towards the Nepal from Birgan side, so there is a temple there, small temple, because all the time the landslides is happening. So you have to pray to the goddess first, cross that road. Otherwise, you might get hit by the stone or, rock or something. So always there were the queue, the cars and the buses will stop, we pray to the goddess and then we climb. So just, to cross that road, you have to pray to the
Because
goddess.
the locals know the dangers.
Yeah.
They know, they hear, they see. While people who go from outside, they only experience that time what they're seeing. They don't know what can go wrong, what can happen, what.
So when we do the Kailash Parikrama, there's there's not imaginary, but there's a gate constructed there. You say you walk through the Yam Dwar, that is the gate of death. Then you start.
Yeah. In Tanzania, there is a mountain which is very low height.
No,
Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, that's in Kenya.
It's many. No, it's in Tanzania. Kilimanjaro is in Tanzania.
No, Kenya. It is Kenya.
They used to climb, but they need to really practice for that.
I have a friend who's done that. It is there. They have proper walking paths. It's the only snow-covered peak in the southern hemisphere, apart from the Antarctic.
But even in India, if you go on these hikes, which I have gone, you know what the obsession is? Not the climbing. They don't enjoy the scenery. They don't enjoy anything. But they want to be right on the top, watching the sunrise.
Yes.
I just don't understand the obsession. Like recently, we went to Zongri, which is in Sikkim. It's one of the highest peaks in Sikkim. And we reached there in the afternoon, and everybody's half dead. And the whole plan was 4 o'clock in the morning, get up, walk up, stand somewhere and see the sunrise. I said, I'm going now.
How many sunrise?
I'm going to go now and come back and sleep, and you all can get up at 4 o'clock and go for the sunrise.
I went
to the peak in the afternoon only and came back. I had no intention of going in the 4 o'clock. I was busy snoring. But everyone has this thing, we have to go with our headlamps and all that. Oof,
the experiences.
It's fun to, do the hiking. We did it in Bhutan, a little small hikes. It's real fun. Yeah.
But I have no obsession that I have to climb Everest or Annapurna. I like climbing, but I enjoy the climb, not so much that I have to reach the top. And
I've done some camping.
Take so many photos there. And
I did Harkidun.
Harkidun is a very, very nice one. I had taken a 12-year-old. So I had gone with my children. 12 years. It's a children's trip.
Has anyone climbed Everest without oxygen, AK? Any idea currently?
No. I don't know.
Even in 14 peaks, he manages it only because of the oxygen. So, and he had said in beforehand that he will not do it without oxygen because he had that deadline, right? 60 days.
Yeah, right. No, there's this Swiss or Austrian climber, Reinhard Messner or something. I'm not sure. He climbs without oxygen.
Maybe he did.
But when the nature is not providing you air properly, there is no point of saying the manly thing and not unmanly thing.
We should tell everyone about 14 Peaks. Basically, 14 Peaks is a documentary on Netflix where it shows a Nepalese guy who's he's young in his 20s. He decides to climb 14 peaks, including Everest, in how many days? In 60 days.
I think it's not 60 days. There is some time limit. I don't know what it is.
It is, I think 30 days or 60 days is one of the two. And he does it. And they show it's literally like a joke. He goes there, puts on his oxygen, and he gets to some point pretty high up by air, helicopter or something. And then he just climbs up. He has a group.
You mean he doesn't climb from the bottom?
No, that's why he can't do. That's why he did it.
That's a sham.
And he goes with a lot of Sherpas because he himself is also a Sherpa descendant, and it's very sweet. Every time he comes back, he touches his mother's feet and all. So each time the mother, she blesses him, but she doesn't know whether he'll come back because he's climbing 14 of them.
If he's not climbing from the bottom, then it's a total sham.
No, it's not from the
Modi
bottom.
ji-
Remember, he goes in a helicopter even for Everest.
Okay.
To
Oh,
base camp, he goes in a
oh,
helicopter.
is it?
Rishi,
Then
I'm
that's a
asking,
sham. Yeah.
I'm asking, they haven't been to Kailash Parvat on with the helicopter's help or no? Not yet.
You don't climb Kailash. Kailash is
No, I'm
considered
not saying
temple.
climbing, but they can go.
No,
to
no.
And-
You can take picture. They don't allow. I've
They
not
don't
seen
allow
anyone.
you to land. Okay.
Yeah, forget
They must have
landing.
crossed, but yeah.
There are no helicopter rides there for Kailash. First of all, it's in
Ah.
China now. It's in China. So you have
Oh,
to take permission to get
Permission.
there.
Right.
Tibet is conquered by China. So they don't have any helicopter rides. The Chinese couldn't care a fig about Kailash. For them,
There's
it's just something
This
else.
is another interesting point I forgot to mention. Mallory's younger brother Trafford was in the Air Force, and he used to tease Mallory, "Will you climb it first, or will I go in my plane first to Everest, the top of Everest?" So because the British were thinking, what if they fly there to Everest?
Yeah.
Why do they have to climb it? But Mallory supposedly reached first before. So now I don't know whether still don't think they can go and drop somebody on Everest.
No, I don't think so. There have been some.
The flying
flights or
conditions
something,
are
but-
very bad
Yeah.
there.
The air is very,
so
very
many
light.
storms
You
and
cannot,
wind is very, very strong.
No, more than strong. The
All
air is
heights
very
only
light.
they tell you that how
It's
strong
risky. It's too risky.
It's very light. It doesn't support. But then this Nirmal is a sham there. I didn't know that. He just goes up there and just does this.
No, I mean
total
he
sham.
doesn't go up, but he does reach all the base
No,
camps or the
that,
second. I think he doesn't even base camp, one camp higher than base camp. He goes by helicopter. That much I saw.
I got it. I know. I saw. It was just a good pictorial, so I like to see
Yeah, it was worth watching. You all should see it, how he does it. It's quite crazy. And he's from a very simple village family, but he's tough. And he trains how he's trained.
People only are tough,
Yeah, they show his training also, how he runs every
the
day.
urban
But,
people, they won't even
see-
take the risk of the life. Second thing, they are not fit up, just like
See-
natural. That means
See,
those are natural.
AKG. This, I mean, we live in a
their
material
houses are
world.
up on the hill, so they walk every day. The Sherpas live on the mountains, so here and here and here.
There is
They
some.
walk with their animals, their horses and the.
I remember Nainital schools and all
I was
that.
just going to say this. So I was studying in Nainital, right? You remember? These Sherpas used to carry one trunk full of our clothes and whatnot, and one hold all with the bedding.
Yeah.
With just on their head, they used to have that band, and on their back, and they used to walk literally
they would reach
like this.
faster than before
like
you.
this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and they would go straight up.
They
whereas the road
literally
goes
like
that.
animals.
Yeah.
The
In
way
Bhutan, I called the driver. I
So
said,
cute.
please come. And he was in front of me and I was holding his shoulder.
So have you seen in Valley of Flowers? Valley of Flowers, mules are not permitted. It's the only trek in India where mules are not permitted. And these Sherpas are carrying people in baskets on their back
Yeah.
up that path.
Yeah.
I was shocked.
Even in Jammu.
So you pay a
it's
hefty
better
amount,
also.
and there's a proper straw basket, like with the tea garden we collect.
They have
And then the
people
tourist
sitting there.
sits in the basket.
Yeah.
on
You
his
have to
back.
go near the rock, small rock, and then climb on top, and then they will
Yeah.
go down, and then.
Again you
I
climb
said, no,
back.
I'm not going to do that.
It was terrible. I don't know how they can allow all these things.
Yeah.
But that's so unsafe, no? It's really unsafe.
Very
You can
dangerous
fall off.
also.
But if they're living, you see, they earn money
Yes,
through
that's the
that.
way that's
Yeah.
the way they are.
Yeah.
People are going in dolis to
Yeah.
Kedarnath and other places also.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
but,
only with two people, and this is basket with one person.
but sorry, you were saying there are some Sherpas. I mean, we've not heard of them, or they have climbed Everest 10 times, more than double
now
digits also.
just
A
couple.
single. It's just that they don't have the money. Otherwise, they are far more hardier.
I was in
One thing has been playing on my mind for quite a while. I thought, let me just share it with you.
Sure.
So partly, AK, when she read the last lines, of his last letter to his wife, he realized that he loved her. I think we all need such a partner in our lives who we keep saying that I love you, I love you, I love you, but still you go and so ardently follow a passion. I mean, he's actually ignoring his family and the love of his life, so-called, his wife. But his first love was always the Everest, I feel. Only in the end, he realizes that maybe not, maybe I took her for granted. But, I mean, it's like you saying you love someone, but you're not with them for the time that you're alive, and you're risking your life every single expedition just to fulfill a passion. And
It's
I think
vice
even in the
So,
versa.
Smita ji,
We
So-
also, ladies also have to say to men also,
no,
So vice
Smita ji,
versa. Mudit ji is agreeing with me.
no, I'm saying something.
Vice versa.
No, no.
When she had the baby.
The absence of something then makes you long for it.
Yeah.
Where
Absence of
he's away
something.
from the mountain, he loves the mountain. Now when
He
he's at the
loves-
mountain,
huh.
he is loving his wife. So this is
He's
the
loving his
absence.
wife, right?
And I also think on that day he had this doubt
That he will not be
maybe he
alive.
will not be able to
Not
get
survive.
there.
No, why do you say that, AKG? Does it say in the
Because
book
why
that he had a
suddenly
doubt?
this depression? I'm telling you, when you read this letter, it's as if he knows
I
either
see.
he's going to
Okay.
reach there and die, or he's not
Okay.
going to reach there.
Okay.
You feel that when you read this
Okay,
letter,
I understand.
that he
I
feels that he should not have come.
He may have had a premonition of this
Yes,
thing not coming.
yes, like that is exactly what it was. It was a premonition he had. And plus the other fellow in the team got snow blindness. He had to be left in the previous camp. He couldn't see for 3 days. He was blind because of
There's
snow
no
blindness.
wounds in the feet. It becomes
In
like
the
someone's
end,
fingers also.
yes,
Oh,
3 fingers.
Lord.
So in the end,
Children, it's not
these two
easy.
were fit enough. And previous day, Mallory had to stop, and another two went. They also had to stop, come back. Then the last day, Mallory and
And the
Sandy went.
nose. And because you
This was the last attempt. They decided now internally, this is the last attempt to go out.
No, just
Uh,
literally eat you up.
I would say see this movie Everest 1996. That's also on Netflix. It's an outstanding film and with scenery and photography.
Yeah, we will. Yeah. I might have seen
What was
it.
it?
Okay, so this is the next book, Single in the City. And I think you got nine votes.
And
for
I
this
got
book.
request from
Very light.
Mita have tell her to have some light books also.
Yeah, so this is a very light, funny book. She is a journalist, Sushmita Bose, and she used to write a column in the newspaper. And so this is a culmination of all those columns and her move from Calcutta to Delhi and all the funny things she found about Delhi compared to Calcutta. So it's a nice light book and compared to Paths of Glory. And it's so thin, see?
I know. That's why we
Thinking you're tempting us to read.
end of April. We pushed it for end of April.
Yeah, and the meeting's been fixed for the 29th
Right.
because Meeta is also traveling. So hope to see more of you there. Only 2 online.
Yeah.
Yeah. One
Might be
joined.
listening.
क्या नाम है? Smita Kashyap.
Acha. So the some of them who said they would join, they didn't join. It's okay. Meeta, would you like to add it? So thank you all for coming and hope to see you all next month.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ike.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye.